Hello, this is Davi. Welcome to another Encarando o Sobrenatural official video. You can't discuss the Brazilian national team without mentioning the CBF. The media led the public to believe or think that it's the players' fault, lack of passion, lack of love for the jersey, and so on. The will to win is what's missing for our players. People argue, right? Always putting the blame on the individual, but the problem goes much deeper, my brother. And what if the individual who's there didn't deserve to be there and only got to that position, was only put there because there were deals, commercial interests behind it? What if I told you that a good part of those who are there for that reason? Because someone said put him in because it will increase the contract's value, take that one out because he's already old, he's not worth as much anymore. We see more and more evidence of that. Look, currently the one in charge of the CBF is the son of our illustrious Gilmar Mendes, one of the gods of Olympus. He doesn't have any convictions, mainly because there's no way he could be convicted, since as a god of Olympus he has the famous, the prerogative, that's what it's called, the protections of his office. Any formal process or investigation against him requires authorization from the Prosecutor General's office, but between us, we know that will never happen, right? But we can see some strange things involving him. For example, the research I did here says ties to people targeted by Operation Car Wash. The minister has been the target of criticism and requests for impeachment, right, for removal, filed by the Prosecutor General's office, along with those presented by former Prosecutor General Rodrigo Janotti for granting habeas corpus to people under investigation with whom he had social or professional ties. The most high-profile case involved the transportation businessman Jacoby Barata, whose daughter's wedding Gilmar Mendes was the godfather of. So the guy's giving in here, right? For a guy under investigation, granted habeas corpus for the guy whose wedding he was the godfather of. Is that good enough for you? There are more contracts. And the IDP Institute, the Brazilian Institute of Education, Development and Research, IDP, a college where the minister is secretary and founding partner, is constantly mentioned by critics. Organizations point out alleged conflicts in sponsorships received from private companies and million-dollar contracts signed by subsidiaries, like the recent agreement with the CBF Academy for the training of soccer coaches. At the same time, the minister issued court decisions that directly impacted the Brazilian Football Confederation, CBF, leading to accusations of favoritism from political opponents and members of parliament. As if that weren't enough, there are also more investigative procedures, extrajudicial investigations, and sectors focused on fighting corruption, such as Transparency International Brazil. They criticize his decisions, right, which annulled investigations based on the sharing of tax data without prior judicial authorization, or that halted inquiries into wrongdoing. For example, the case involving the Getulio Vargas Foundation and the disagreement over the MAS case. In internal debates at the Supreme Court, Minister Freire consequently challenges what he describes as excesses and unorthodox methods comparable to those of the Lava Jato operation. Recently, he has had public clashes with colleagues from the court over procedural conduct and negotiations and plea bargains in the so-called MAS case. So he's a guy he's constantly making moves. Unfortunately, you have to watch your words when talking about a guy like that, right? But it's the son of this guy who's running the CBF. And Zema himself, right, presidential candidate, Rogério Lima, right? I really want to thank Rogério. This video wouldn't be possible without Rogério. I'll show you Zema here. Where is it? I took a screenshot and will share it with you, family. Here, look, a report from Globo. Zema criticizes Gilmar Mendes' son for his influence in the CBF and says that the Supreme Court's hand even reaches Brazil's lineup. The former governor said that Francisco Mendes openly bragged about Neymar's call-up. This year, the Minas Gerais politician was charged by the Office of the Prosecutor General with slandering the judge. So that's it. You can't even talk, right? Because those guys are judges, man. And it's the Supreme Court, not just any judge. It's the Supreme. And his son is leading the CBF now, right? Just so you know. Here it is. Look, Gilmar Mendes' son becomes the most powerful executive in the CBF. This is from UOL, okay? It's not conservative media, it's UOL. Article from O Globo. Gilmar Mendes hides conflict of interest and his son expands power in the CBF. Then come the outlandish solutions, which I want to leave for the end, right? Bill. We're going to talk a little about it at the end of this video, but since I know a lot of people haven't seen our documentary about the CBF and its presidents, I'll give a summary here of the most serious case, alright? I have the articles Rogerio sent me from mainstream media, and I'll present them just like on TV so you can see. Please pay close attention. I even want you to show this to that guy who's crazy about soccer, that guy who keeps arguing. He says it's so-and-so's fault for not being loyal to the team and all that. In this documentary, you basically understand that while the fan is there out of love, out of passion, the guys are there to drive up contract values for money. These cases you'll see from the media happened before betting companies entered the business. You can take everything you're about to see and you're going to see some disgusting schemes, literally right there. And you can square that, alright? For today, then you'll understand. First, watch this documentary. Once again, thanks to Rogerio Lima, much love, brother. And next, right, we're going to look at the current case of this law to try, once again, in a magical way to fix this. So, watch with me.
A new question came up in the official investigation. Could this financial activity that emerged coincide with the increase in assets of President Ricardo Teixeira?
The Parliamentary Inquiry Commission hired a financial investigation firm to track the CBF president's accounts in Brazil and abroad, discovering his business with 3 companies in tax havens, where the law is to keep the names of investors absolutely confidential.
These were the 5 income tax returns of Ricardo Teixeira, analyzed by the Parliamentary Inquiry Commission's experts. In the 1996 tax return, the first offshore company appears. Teixeira sent 12,000 reais to a certain Globo Anstalt, which investigators did not find registered with the Ministry of Finance or any other official agency. But a detailed internet search conducted by investigators revealed that Globo Anstalt had 2 business interests. The first was located in the Principality of Liechtenstein, between Austria and Switzerland, one of the most secretive tax havens in the world, and the second was in the United States. Coincidentally, the interest is exactly the same as the one that appears on Ricardo Teixeira's American driver's license. And that wasn't the only coincidence. In 1995, Globo bought a house in a luxury condominium in Miami, the same house used by Ricardo Teixeira during his vacations. In 97, Globo bought another house. At the beginning of this year, it was sold to the president of the CBF and he got a good discount. Globo paid almost $925,000 for the property, which it then sold for $800,000, $125,000 less.
The company has an owner.
The company has an owner?
All right, who is the owner of the company he sold the house to?
I didn't understand your question.
The owner of the company?
I'm not sure because the person who sold me the house was the company's attorney in the U.S.
Another coincidence, the dollars that Globo received from Ricardo Teixeira arrived through this brokerage in Rio de Janeiro. SWAPE, Sociedade de Câmbio Limitada, the same brokerage that received more than R$1 million as an intermediary for CBF's loans abroad. Among the owners of SWAPE were 2 longtime partners and friends of Ricardo Teixeira, Renato Tiraboschi and Otavio Fieri. The parliamentary inquiry investigated the financial life of Otavio Keller and discovered a second company in a tax haven and found that he also received commissions from the CBF. Otavio Keller was Teixeira's partner in Restaurant 2001 from the Eltor Group, and it was him who sold this house in one of the most valuable areas of the resort town of Búzios in Rio to the company Ameritech Road from the British Virgin Islands. Ameritech in turn transferred the house to the company Minas Investimentos, which belongs to the company. The house, according to the deed, was bought by the offshore company in '96 for 14,500 reais and sold by Ameritech a year later to Ricardo Teixeira for 500,000 reais. The deed reveals that the offshore company, Ameritech, had engineer Luiz Eduardo Landim Baltazar as its representative in this deal, partner of Teixeira and Keller in the Restaurant 2001. At the Gama parliamentary inquiry, Ricardo Teixeira stated he has no companies outside Brazil. But this document from the Ministry of Finance shows that the taxes in Búzios, which were the responsibility of the company Ameritech, were paid by Ricardo Teixeira with money that came from his own bank account. While investigating Ricardo Teixeira's business dealings, the Parliamentary Inquiry Committee found a third company in a tax haven. Sanude, its tabis mano, also established in the very exclusive Principality of Liechtenstein, it owns more than half of Teixeira's assets. Ow. This company, which controls 97% of the shares of Ricardo Teixeira's main Brazilian firm, RLJ Participações, even owns the house where the president of the CBF lives. Teixeira's brother, Guilherme, was Sanude's representative in Brazil, a position now held by the owner of this CPF, as stated in the document. And this CPF belongs to Ricardo Teixeira. It's all Teixeira. Thank you.
The curious thing...
What the parliamentary inquiry found out is that all the companies owned by the president of the CBF are running at a loss. Even so, his assets keep increasing. Even though they're in the red, the companies bought 2 houses valued at almost 2 million reais and an apartment in this beachfront building in Rio de Janeiro. On his personal income tax return, Teixeira declared in 1994 assets of just over 3.2 million reais. From 1994 until the beginning of this year, his assets grew by more than 3 million reais. He bought the house in the United States, this vacation home in the mountain region of Rio.
The properties here in this area vary, but starting from 650 up to 1 million reais, you can make a deal.
He bought 2 more apartments, land in a new area, and 6 more imported cars. He had a boat and a speedboat built. The parliamentary inquiry found clues about some sources of Ricardo Teixeira's wealth. Besides his salary as president of the CBF, there are also the always successful investments he makes in the stock market and foreign exchange market.
I've made many trades in the capital markets, especially given my background. Thank you.
From 96 until this year, as confirmed by information from the Stock and Commodities Exchange, the executive participated in the market for 46 months. He made more than 6 million reais and lost just under 300,000. He moved an impressive amount of money, more than 2 billion and 300 million reais, almost all of it. More than 1 billion and 800 million reais were invested through DC brokerage. At this point, the Parliamentary Inquiry Commission found another coincidence. One of the former partners of Suave Brokerage, the same one that brokered CDF's loans and sent money from Teixeira to the offshore company Blue Who, works at DC. Renato Tiraboschi was also a partner of Ricardo Teixeira in the Auto Group's Shopping 2001. This year, he was the one who arranged the $8 million commission, almost 20 million reais. As the intermediary for the newest contract between the CBF and a beverage company,
Even while making money in the market, receiving a salary from the Confederation and buying assets, Ricardo Teixeira, just like the CBF, took out loans abroad. Trying to understand the reason for the loans, the Senate CPI advisors decided to investigate how the dollars entered Brazil.
In 1996, El Turco Bar and Restaurant, with Ricardo Teixeira himself as guarantor, took out $2.5 million from Banco Real in New York. And the U.S. banks sent this correspondence in English to Banco Real in Rio. The message said that if the loan wasn't paid, the Brazilian headquarters wouldn't need to reimburse the American branch. The bank would forgo the money. The Parliamentary Inquiry Committee was surprised the bank didn't want to collect the debt, investigated more, and found another document. After the loan to El Turco, the president of the CBF asked in July 1997 for another $500,000 for another one of his restaurants. He wanted his son to be the guarantor. The bank's credit committee employee didn't understand why and wrote in an internal memo, found by the central bank and now in the hands of the Parliamentary Inquiry Commission. By the way, I don't even know why a guarantor is needed since it's a commercial operation with his own resources.
President Ricardo Teixeira didn't want to say anything about his assets, despite our team's persistent attempts to contact him. Otávio Keller, Luiz Eduardo Landim Baltazar, and Renato Tiraboschi also did not want to give an interview. But what about the hope of our fans? Will it push the national team to new victories? Take a look at the next one.
What the senators know is that until '96, before the $160 million contract was signed with the sports equipment company Nike, the CBF was making a profit, about 4 million reais. In '97, the sponsorship money started coming in. And the losses also started. 14 million reais in 98 more money. And more money lost 16 million reais. But the negative numbers didn't stop the CBF from raising employees' salaries. Personnel expenses jumped from almost 5 million reais in 97 to about 18 million reais last year. The board decided to join the payroll in 98, as shown by Ricardo Teixeira's income tax return. In 3 years, the executives' salaries tripled. Today, the CBF spends 241,000 reais per month on them. The main beneficiary is the Secretary General, Marco Antonio Teixeira, the uncle of the CBF president. Last year, Marco Antonio Teixeira received a total of 507,000 reais in salaries. His nephew, the president, got 418,000. When analyzing the internal documents of the CBF, the Senate advisors discovered that President Ricardo Teixeira has not been benefiting only his uncle. Another relative of Teixeira received financial help with CBF money for the 1998 political campaign. 14,000 reais came out of the CBF's coffers for the city council campaign of Newton Teixeira, Ricardo Teixeira's nephew, and a candidate in Piraí, in the state of Rio de Janeiro. Football money was also donated to other candidates, and it went into private accounts. The treasurer, Ariberto Pereira Filho, earns about 3,000 reais a month, as shown on the organization's payroll. But he received checks totaling 216,000 reais in just 1 year. The driver of President Ricardo Teixeira, Odair Araújo Silva, officially earns almost 3,000 reais. And in just 2 months, he received 2 checks totaling 43,000 reais. Federation officials were not left out. This check for 100,000 reais was intended for the Goiás Federation, but ended up in the account of the organization's president, Wilson da Silveira. This other one, for almost 64,000 reais, instead of going to the federation's treasury, ended up in the account of the advisor, Jaime Ferreira de Oliveira Neto. This check for 40,000 reais was meant for the Amazonas Federation, but ended up in the account of a car dealership. Occasional aid totaling more than 5 million reais just in 1998. The Parliamentary Inquiry Commission found that, after Nike's sponsorship, spending on official representation, sports congresses, and travel tripled. Representation expenses jumped from 781,000 reais in 1996 to more than 2,300,000 reais last year. Among the checks are payments for lunches and dinners of officials and athletes in restaurants that, at the time, belonged to Ricardo Teixeira. At the request of the Parliamentary Commission of Inquiry, technicians from the Federal Court of Accounts are investigating the travel agency SBTR, which belongs to Wagner. José Abraão, a friend of Ricardo Teixeira and a member of the Fiscal Council of the Brazilian Football Assistance Institute, created by Ricardo Teixeira. SBTR, which was renamed Planeta Brazil, holds the monopoly on the entity's travel and still doesn't offer any discounts.
Do you know anyone from Estela Barros? Of course I know. I know the owner of SBTR, of Estela Barros. And all these expenses are probably included. Some expenses are for national competitions, others for CBF championship competitions, and others for the Brazilian national team.
In the last 3 years, the CBF has paid SBTR more than 31 million reais. That's enough money to take the 11,000 Brazilian professional players to Europe with round-trip tickets. And there would still be 6,000 tickets left over. In 1998, the same CBF that used to lend and donate football money started having cash flow problems. The solution found by the board was to take out 6 loans abroad by the end of last year, totaling almost 60 million reais. The interest was paid in advance, and part of that money did not enter Brazil as required by law. Almost 20 million reais were paid in interest. That's why the parliamentary inquiry into football, the Federal Revenue Service, and the central bank are investigating CBF's loans. This study by the parliamentary inquiry, carried out with the support of the central bank, shows that in the same period, between the end of 1997 and last year, Delta Bank made 52 loans to Brazilian borrowers. And only the CBF paid the interest in advance. And it reveals more. The CBF was the only borrower to pay interest above 13% per year. Even so, President Ricardo Teixeira said in the chamber that 8 other companies had paid interest rates just as high as the organization's rate. The companies denied the information in writing. TV film mentioned by Ricardo Teixeira said it didn't even take out a loan. The government of Minas Gerais, also mentioned, explained that its last loan was in 1995 with an interest rate of 5.78%. 43.57 per year. These were the interest rates of just the loans taken out by the CBF. In 1998, in another loan, the CBF took out 4,360,000 reais from Delta Bank in New York, which is owned by Aloysio Faria, a Brazilian. 9 months later, it paid off the debt, and it reached 8,621,000 reais. Almost 100% interest in just 9 months.
The rate for 1 year is not the rate for another year. You know perfectly well that whoever bought dollars in January 1999 at 2.15 after 10 days, I have to pay 2.20 for it. I mean, that's a normal market thing.
The central bank has already stated in a document that the CBF made a bad deal. When asked by the Congressional Inquiry Committee, Delta Bank's lawyer, Roberto Rosas, said in writing that Delta Bank does not lend money. It only brokers loans. The vice president of Delta Bank, Newton Bleff, immediately contradicted the lawyer. The parliamentary inquiry then summoned the person responsible for Delta in Brazil. But he, in correspondence in English, said he was traveling to Switzerland, where he would take care of his health. The parliamentary inquiry wants to know, after all, whose money it is. And there are more questions. Part of the CBF's money before reaching Brazil went through several.
Contacted for 2 weeks by our team, President Ricardo Teixeira was informed about the accusations and did not want to respond to any of them.
That's right, my brother. It's unbelievable, isn't it? But more than that, he, in correspondence in English, said to the media, right, which isn't shown here, because it's missing Switzerland, where he would deal with, the CPI revealed the scheme, my brother. There's no point in demanding loyalty to the team if you're dealing with money from the bank. English for weeks, team. The CPI is coming in exactly for that money. There's no point, right? Look, Delta Bank doesn't lend money. Isso, money. Não adianta.
CPI, Banco Delta players, what happens to them? Is it a lack of talent, competence, organization, or love for the yellow jersey?
Well, my brothers, unfortunately, right, there is some media that is still good. We can never condemn all the media, right? There are good people working for the people, yes. But a part of it has been corrupted, right? A good part is corrupted. And now, as I told you, right, here come the wild solutions, and one of those solutions is to draft a bill. Which is, my God, it's just for show, family, a bill. I'll show it to you here, Esther, don't look. A bill in the chamber prohibits athletes who play outside Brazil and foreign coaches in the national team. Proposal by Congressman Luis Carlos Hawley, that those called up are connected to Brazilian clubs and prohibits sponsorship by betting companies of sports entities. This would be good, my brother, if it were possible, right? First, there's no way you can prohibit the coaches. It's absurd, right? That would literally take the Brazilian identity away from the player. If you have a Brazilian player playing at Manchester, for example, at Real Madrid, you wouldn't be able to call him up. If the law is approved the way it is here, if we took the years when we were champions, right, with Ronaldinho, Ronaldinho Gaucho, with Ronaldo, Ronaldinho Gaucho, Rivaldo, and so many others, right? Yeah, these players wouldn't have been able to be called up, and consequently, we would have been in trouble, right? So this part is absurd. It's simply a way, right, of doing what European clubs have been dreaming of for a long time. Because I've already told you, European clubs have always said that. The players should represent the national team of whatever country the club they're under contract with belongs to. So, for example, the guy is Brazilian, but he's playing in Argentina. He'll defend the Argentine national team because he plays for an Argentine club. They've had this idea for a long time, the Europeans, right? And obviously this doesn't exist, right? Because you might even be working, having a job somewhere else. But you see that most of these players, Ronaldo himself and so many others, live here in Brazil because they're Brazilian, they like Brazil. They're over there earning their living, right? But no, they haven't stopped being Brazilian. But they came with this proposal, and you see that in the middle of a just cause, because I'm against foreign coaches, the guy already comes with this, right? Trying to solve things in a magical way, but actually it just takes another step toward globalization and toward doing what those guys want. So you see how complicated this whole thing is. And then, right, thinking about game results, obviously we would never have won these last 2 World Cups, or maybe even more, but these 2 most recent ones, the 4th and 5th, without our players who play abroad. So then, it's an absurd proposal. The other point he brings up here is the issue of betting companies. Man, the question is, will this law apply to the whole world or just to the CBF? Because that's the deal. There's no point in trying to make a regional law if the whole world is going in the opposite direction. So, it's a much more complex issue. In my opinion, what this deputy here, Luis Carlos Rauli, wants to do is just make a vote-grabbing proposal. You know, he's seeing the outrage people are feeling. People breaking TVs. There are even paintings on the ground, you know, with the Brazilian flag, people buying paint remover, paint to erase, they're outraged. Yeah, and that's what really frustrates me about this country, because we don't see the same outrage with other absurd things. For example, this fuel here, this is that useless fuel they call the fuel of the future. Damaging cars, it's expensive, making older cars pollute a lot more. And not just the older ones, but sports cars too. Ruining them, right? Since most of them run only on gasoline. So, you know, these things don't really make people angry, right? Lula keeps saying a bunch of absurd things, right? And every time he opens his mouth, it just makes the country's situation worse and takes away credibility. The gods of Olympus acting without any transparency, you know, making decisions like we read at the beginning from Gilmar Mendes himself. Decisions, my brothers, that are shady and questionable, to put it mildly, because we can't say more. But anyway, right, the purpose of this video was to show you this, my brothers. That while they make these speeches and propose these laws, the real problem isn't being faced head on. Only those who look at the Brazilian national team thinking about love, patriotism, strength, and the weight of the jersey are the fans. The directors, those who are running the CBF, are treating this like a 4th or 5th tier priority because, like it or not, Brazilians keep making them richer. It's by watching the games, paying huge ticket prices, so many people traveled, and sometimes I even thought this, if you heard a Brazilian guy cheering for a foreign national team, I used to say, man, this guy must be really rich. But no. It's a guy who buys this in 12 installments on his credit card. It's a guy who borrows money. It's a guy who sells his own car, which he bought in installments, spent 2 years paying for it, 4 years paying for it, and sold it just to go. Then it's my dream, so he went. You know, it's not just rich people there, no. So when those guys do that, whether they want to or not, they keep the value of the national team really high, you know. And when money is involved, man, especially with these betting companies coming in, then things really get serious. Anyway, I hope this video helped you understand that the mess, you know, it's a swamp, literally. It's not just about the players, but there are some players you can see aren't even trying. And those players who don't put in the effort shouldn't even be there. I saw a guy saying, he said it's absurd because each player there had their own cameraman, their own video editor, their own camera operator, and their own photographer. Look how crazy that is, right? Each one is the protagonist of their own movie. There's no team spirit. And if you ask me for my opinion, that's what's missing. Yeah, they're playing too much in a European style. Like I go in, do my part, and screw the rest. Brazilians were never like that. It used to be about the team. He's my friend. These are my friends here, my partners. We're a team, we're one body, and we're going to play together. That 1994 team with Romario, right? People used to say that technically it was really bad, that it only had Romario. Man, and you see the partnership he had with Bebeto there, right? Amazing. They overcame so much, didn't they? That lack of technique, let's put it that way, that the press talked about, saying the team played ugly, didn't play pretty, and yet they won the World Cup. Right? They struggled, it was a tough fight. Winning a World Cup is not easy. But, you know, things were different. Anyway, my brothers, the story, nothing more than the story. If you want to see more details about all this corruption in the CBF, we have our video talking about each of the most recent directors, right? And I recommend that you watch it to dig deeper. Stay with God, brothers. Hugs. Let's move forward together. Boom.